Hey, how's it going everybody? My name is Aryan and I'm actually really excited about today's video because we're talking about the brand new PortKeys HD7H. Just a quick disclaimer before we get into this video, PortKeys did in fact send me this monitor before it's released to review, but they're not at all involved in the creative process of this video. All of the opinions I share are my own and I'm not being paid to say anything, and PortKeys does not get to preview this video before it's posted. Now, I've said in the past before that I largely prefer using 7-inch camera monitors over 5-inch ones. That's just to do with the fact that I don't think 5-inch camera monitors offer enough of a jump over the built-in LCD screen on your camera. But again, that's just my opinion. I've just really preferred 7-inch options, and it's really hard to find a very good budget 7-inch camera monitor. But I think this new offering from PortKeys is exactly that. It's really the new 7-inch budget king, if you will. Speaking of budget, let's go over the pricing of this guy right now, because I feel like a lot of things I'm about to mention will make a lot more sense if you know just how affordable this guy is. So as of right now, PortKeys has told me that this guy will launch at $99 US. Again, that's a sub $100 camera monitor, and it's a big 7-inch screen. You're not talking about a 5-inch monitor, it's a pretty big one, and I think it's fantastic value for what this guy offers. So let's go over some of the I/O of this monitor before we delve into all the specifications. Starting off at the very top, you have all of the buttons to navigate this thing. Again, you've got your menus, you've got your up-down buttons, and then you have a big power switch right there, and then some custom buttons as well. And right in the middle, you see that is a lock for the battery plate. Speaking of the battery plate, it just takes Sony batteries, and then you can even use a pretty massive one here, and because of the lock, it doesn't just come out easily, so you actually have to unlock it before you take it out. The buttons on this guy are quite clicky. Here, I'll bring it up to the mic here. And this personally is just a personal preference thing. I find them just a little too sharp and annoying, if you will. But again, if you don't care, you don't care. But I think the buttons could have been dampened a little bit more. Along the left side of the monitor, you have a 1/4-20 mount, which is nice to have. Again, that just means you can mount it vertically as well if you want. And the same thing along the right side as well. And of course, you have the standard 1/4-20 at the bottom as well. Speaking at the bottom, we also have an HDMI in, AV in. There's also a headphone jack at the bottom to monitor audio, and you have a USB Type A port to update the firmware of this guy. You also have a DC port if you don't want to use batteries, which is always a nice option. That wraps up everything on the monitor itself, and there are a few other things that you get in the box. First of which is an HDMI to HDMI cable, so that's a full-size cable, and you also have an HDMI to micro HDMI. And again, both of these are a good size, so if you have your camera monitor just on top of your camera, both these cables are going to get the job done for you. You also get an AV cable, which I found quite odd. I don't know if anyone still has any use for this, but you get that in the box as an input. You also get a very flimsy ball head. Again, it's just nice that you don't need anything else to get the monitor up and running, so they give you everything you need, which can't be said about every company. But yeah, you do get a ball head with it. Flimsy, but it's still a ball head. They still give you one, but I would recommend buying one off of Amazon. SmallRig has some good ones. But yeah, this ball head should get the job done. This monitor is quite light, so maybe it'll get the job done, but yeah, it's quite flimsy, this guy. You also get these two little brackets. Now these go on the left and right side of the monitor, just like this. And they snap in with a nice satisfying click. And that basically gives you 2 extra points here to mount the included sun hood. So yeah, you do get quite a lot of stuff included with this guy. So the sun hood just kind of slides in. So this is what it looks like with the sun hood applied. I'm personally not a big sun hood guy, but if that's something you find yourself using often, then it's very nice that it's included in the box. Again, they pretty much give you everything you need to get it running just in the box for $99 US. I think that's a fantastic bargain. One other thing I do want to say that I like about the HDMI port in particular is the fact that it's at the back facing down. So when you're viewing the monitor, the cable's actually just running down the monitor, which is fantastic. I personally don't like it when the HDMI port's on the side. I mean, maybe it makes it easier to access, but I just find it in the way. Like, I want to be able to grab my monitor from the sides, and I like that the HDMI cable just runs straight down the monitor. That's something I feel like is very underrated, and I like it very much. Now let's get into some of the other specifications of this guy. This is a 1280 by 720 8-bit 1000 nit panel. So it's a pretty good size. Like I mentioned, I really prefer the 7-inch form factor, and being 7-inch, it's honestly not that big either. Compared to the Shinobi 7, which is my main monitor that I use, I think this is a very respectable size. It's quite a bit smaller than the Shinobi. Again, the Shinobi is a slightly different aspect ratio, so that plays a big part of it, but the bezels on this guy, they're quite small, and the screen is actually pushed back a little bit, so the bezels stick out a little bit more. Which again, it's a personal preference thing. I personally prefer a screen that's a little bit more flush, but again, I understand for this price point that can be a little harder to achieve. But a surprising pro of having a screen that's pushed back is I've found that this is a lot more scratch resistant than my DesView monitor, for example, because I have complained in the past that the DesView R7P that I have, it got scratches like the day I got it. And this guy I've had for about a month now, and there's no scratches on it. There are a few fingerprints because, you know, smudges here and there, but you can just wipe those off. There are no micro scratches or major scratches anywhere to be seen, really. The panel is quite clean. I don't know if this is just a better quality panel than the DesView, or it's just the fact that the screen is pushed back a little bit, but I quite prefer having a cleaner screen than a scratched up one. So yeah, that is a very nice little perk of having a screen like this. The overall build quality, again, it's super plastic and cheap. You can't really expect much for a $100 product that's giving you a 7-inch screen, but it's just under 300 grams. So a battery like this is definitely a mistake on this guy. The battery right now is honestly heavier than the monitor itself, so something like this adds a lot more bulk to it. And I think it's quite nice that it does have the lock on the battery mount, so I feel a little bit, more secure about this heavy battery, that it's not just gonna rip the monitor mount off. As you can see here, there's a little slide lock that you have to unlock, and that's when the battery comes out. So that's a very handy feature, but I would highly recommend smaller batteries for this guy. You don't want your battery to be heavier than the monitor. So I have a big list of all the features this monitor has. I'm not gonna go over all of them, but I'll just put them on screen here, and we'll go over some of the highlight options here. False color is nice to have. Peaking is nice to have. The backlight, again, 1000 nits, is pretty good. There's a manual color temperature adjust, which is, again, nice to really dial in the look. I've personally kept mine at 6500 Kelvin. That's given me the most accurate results, but you can really dial that in. It's very nice there. And you have 2 custom function buttons, which is very nice to have as well. And one of the weird quirks of this guy I've noticed is that all of these features are present in the monitor, but you don't have like just a menu option for everything. There are menu options for some main ones, but a lot of the other ones you can only access them if you assign a custom button to them. Like for example, I wanted to use guides, and I was trying to find the setting for guides, and I couldn't find it anywhere. Then I found out you actually have to go into the custom button setting, scroll down, and assign one of the custom buttons to the guides. And then you can adjust what do you want the guide to be, if you want 2:1, 16:9, or whatever you wish. But that's a very odd quirk that I've not seen on other products. Again, I've not used many budget options, but I thought that was kind of weird that all the guides wouldn't just be available to you. Maybe that's something that can be addressed in software, but all of these functions are in fact present in this monitor. And speaking of the software experience isn't the greatest thing in the world, right? Again, it's very, very clunky, and these buttons they're at the top of the monitor, and for this big screen it can be kind of hard to look over and see which one you're pressing. And it's not like a joystick overlay, which down is down, up is up. I sometimes forget which button is the left, right, up, down. I always have to, wherever I'm going, I always have to look. I'm like, all right, I gotta go left, and then I've got to go up. It's a bit clunky in that way. So I really think this monitor is meant to just, you set it up once on day one. I think you have the 2 custom buttons, so you set them up with whatever you want them. I had my guide set to F2, and I have the zooming set to F1, because I just want to punch in really quickly, see if my focus is good, and I have the F2 set to my 235:1 custom overlay. So I want to make sure my stuff looks good with the letterboxing. So those two functions are set there, and then I don't have to mess with the menu. Again, all the other features are quite nice that they're included in this monitor, but I personally find it a bit of a hassle to go through the software. It's not the greatest thing in the world, and maybe they can improve it a little bit with software, but again, the buttons are still there, and I would have preferred a joystick, but again, buttons is what we have here. Now on to the big feature that this monitor is missing, and that would be LUT support. Unfortunately, you can't bring in any of your own LUTs onto this guy, and it doesn't have any built-in either, so whatever your camera is outputting is what this monitor is seeing. And the good thing is that some cameras can output LUTs over HDMI. Unfortunately, Sony doesn't have a bunch of cameras that do that. I believe some of the FX cameras do, but something like my A7 IV, it doesn't output LUTs over HDMI. So if I'm filming in log, I'm stuck with viewing log on my monitor as well. So that's why a monitor with LUTs has really been my go-to. Like, I will not buy a monitor if it doesn't have LUTs on it. But then I did some of my own research, and it seems like none of the sub $100 monitors seem to have LUT support. Again, maybe I missed something, but I did quite a lot of research and I don't think I found any that did, and that goes for 5-inch and 7-inch monitors. Again, that was something I was quite surprised by, but turns out it's quite common in this price point, so I guess I shouldn't be too disappointed. But yeah, it does not have LUT support on this guy. So to wrap it up, who is this monitor for, and do I recommend it to you? So personally, I think this monitor is meant for someone who's just starting out. Like, for example, someone like me, I've been doing this for 7 years almost, and this is really not meant for me, right? I'm not part of their target audience. I'm someone who films with log absolutely 100% of the time, and this is really just the LUT support alone makes it kind of like a disqualifier, if you will. But I know pretty much, I think a good 70% of people I know who film video, they don't film in log. So they might not necessarily care about the LUTs feature. But again, that is a drawback. And if LUTs are a big part of your workflow, this might not be for you. But I know a lot of people who would totally not care about the LUT support because their camera's outputting in, Rec 709, and they just want to view it on a bigger monitor. Again, the major selling point is this 7-inch panel. And again, it's not factory calibrated, but it's a pretty good panel, I'd say. I didn't notice a major, hue shift. The color looked pretty accurate for the most part. Like, I can trust it for, getting a rough idea of what my image is going to look like. Again, this is not for professional colorists, but I think it's a fairly good, respectable panel for what it is. And I feel like PortKeys just has a good reputation for stuff like that. They also make some really high-end products, so I feel like some of the stuff, the consistency is there when it comes to their products across their line. So I would trust PortKeys in the fact that they made a good panel. It's not touchscreen, and again, the navigation isn't the most intuitive thing in the world, but if you set it up on day one and you have your 2 custom buttons doing exactly what you want it to, there's really nothing wrong with this panel. The included sun hood is great, so it's great for viewing outdoors, and it kind of counteracts the 1000 nit peak brightness. Again, 1000 nit isn't the craziest thing in the world, but the sun hood really helps with that. And overall, you get a bunch of stuff in the box, like the HDMI cables, and you also get flimsy, but you do get a ball head as well. So they give you everything you need in the box to get going. So if you're someone who's just starting out and you want an upgrade over your built-in camera LCD screen, I personally would highly recommend going for a 7-inch monitor over a 5-inch one, because you actually see a drastic change in size over your camera LCD screen. But again, that's just my personal opinion. And this guy here just seems to be as good of a 7-inch option as there is one. So I would personally recommend it very highly. And PortKeys just seems to be a brand that you can trust. I've heard nothing but good things about them, and they also make some higher end products, so they have experience in this field. So I personally have no problem recommending this guy. Again, as long as LUTs are not a big part of your workflow. It does have a bunch of the other features. The big one for me being like the zooming, because I want to make sure my focus is good, and the letterboxing as well. That's something I care about quite a bit. Other than the LUTs, I think everything in this monitor works fantastic, and yeah, I couldn't recommend it more. Alright guys, that was it for me today. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to leave it a like, subscribe for more videos like this, and I'll see you guys next time.